The first thing I saw in my new life was 10 teenagers getting fried by lightning. Blue bolts, screaming, bodies flying across the training ground like badly thrown darts. The instructors were panicking. The students were panicking. The rich kid who fired the lightning was panicking hardest of all. And me? I was standing in the crowd, staring at the ground where the victims landed, thinking one single thought. Loot. Okay, context. Rewind about an hour. My name is Li Wei, and an hour earlier, I woke up in a body that wasn't mine, in a martial arts school that wasn't mine, in a world that definitely wasn't mine. 1 second, I'm dying in my old life. The next, I'm standing in a training ground the size of a stadium, surrounded by muscle men doing squats, and a 2.5-meter instructor is dragging some poor kid into a corner for the crime of sitting down. I immediately covered my head and started doing squats too. Fastest career decision I ever made. Then I looked up at the instructor and saw words floating over his head. Big, energetic, average talent, angry, violent maniac. All labeled white, all hovering there like a character sheet nobody asked for. And before I could decide whether I'd gone insane, a truckload of information dumped itself into my brain. So, the world. 1,000 years ago, spiritual energy came back to Earth and everyone woke up with attributes over their heads. They call them affixes, ranked by color, white at the bottom, then green, blue, purple, all the way up to silver and gold. The Earth itself had swollen 10,000 times over, so big the sun now orbits us, which every physicist of the old era took as a personal insult. Several of them jumped off buildings about it. Monsters crawl out of underground caves, guns don't work because dead monsters leak a poison mist that eats technology, so humanity went back to punching things. Martial arts became the national curriculum. And what did the universe give me for this exciting new world? I pulled up my own panel and read my starting hand. Scavenger, rank unique, can collect and recycle trash. Average talent, white. Kidney deficiency, white. Endurance, minus 50%. Let's sit with that last one. The previous owner of this body was 18, handsome, and had the kidneys of a retired accountant. This young man was so dedicated to a certain solo hobby that the universe put it on his permanent record. I checked his memories. It was worse than I thought. My guy, you had this face and you chose that lifestyle. But then I noticed the trash can at the bottom of my panel, an actual recycle bin icon, like a computer desktop. So I did the only reasonable thing. I grabbed the kidney deficiency affix, dragged it in, and hit recycle. A wave of freshness washed through my entire body. Ding! You found trash. Kidney deficiency, white. Recycled for 5 eco points. And then the notification explained what eco points do, and I stopped breathing for a second. They upgrade affixes. They buy raw strength. 100 points equals 1 full point of blood chi, and 1 point of blood chi is a literal ton of force. This body earned 100 kilograms of strength per year of brutal training. My dead kidneys just paid out 6 months of gym time in 1 click. My cheat wasn't seeing affixes. My cheat was that other people's suffering is my currency, which brings us back to the boy in front of me, who chose that exact moment to collapse from exhaustion. A little white orb rolled out of him and stopped at my feet. Weakness, white. I touched it with my shoe. Ding, 1 point. It worked. It worked on other people. I looked around the training ground with new eyes. 100 exhausted teenagers, an angry giant instructor, and little glowing orbs of misery scattered everywhere like someone had spilled a bag of candy. 20 weakness orbs minimum, just lying there. This wasn't a martial arts school. This was a landfill, and I was the only man alive with a garbage truck. Elder Chen, the giant instructor, picked that moment to assemble everyone and announced that his year-end review was coming. Our results were shameful, and training intensity was now doubled. The whole class groaned. I almost hugged him. Double training meant double collapsed teenagers meant double income. Elder Chen stood there scolding us, saying if we didn't shape up, we'd end up as garbage collectors, and even the robots wouldn't want us. Sir, you have no idea. So I spent the morning strolling through the crowd like a man admiring a garden, stepping on orbs. Ding, ding, ding. 12 weakness affixes in 1 lap, each one worth a month of another man's training. And then the doors opened, and the plot walked in. The head instructor of the whole school came through the gate personally escorting a young man, and the head instructor, a genuine expert who could crush anyone in the building, was smiling at this kid like a waiter angling for a tip. The kid was young master Joe Kai from the class next door, and last night he'd gotten struck by divine luck and awakened a blue affix, thunder control. In a city where 99% of people cap out at white, a blue talent meant future nobility. The announcement asked for 10 sparring partners to help the young master practice, 300 coins each. I looked over the young master's head because of course I did. Thunder control, blue. Decent talent, green. And then 2 more. Weakness, white. And impotence, white. 18 years old, already out of service. And here I'd been judging my body's previous owner. Compared to this kid, my dead kidneys were a success story. 10 volunteers lined up, all stronger than the young master, all planning to take a gentle beating for money. The head instructor whispered for them to be careful with the fresh talent, meaning go easy. The volunteers heard be careful, meaning go hard. 10 grown, training-hardened teenagers charged at full power. Joe Kai, who had exactly 0 combat experience and a body weaker than half the class, saw 10 people rushing him and did what any terrified rich kid with a new superpower does. He panicked and pushed both hands out. Thunder happened. That's the scene we opened on. 10 bodies, charred and smoking, flying in 10 directions. The training ground erupting. The head instructor's face going through all 5 stages of grief in 1 second, and orbs raining onto the sand. Serious injury, weakness, near death, a buffet. Everyone rushed forward to help the victims. I also rushed forward, with great compassion, in a path that let me step on every single orb along the way. Ding, 5 points. Ding, 7 points. The dying ones dropped near-death orbs worth 7 each, and yes, I did feel bad for them, in the way you feel bad for a slot machine that's paying out. Then it got better. Elder Chen grabbed Joe Kai and threw him into a wall for almost killing his students. Joe Kai, humiliated, waited until Elder Chen turned his back and shot lightning at him. It barely scorched the big man. Elder Chen turned around with a brand new affix over his head, rage, green, and proceeded to conduct what I can only describe as a percussion concert on the young master's entire body. We all pulled Elder Chen off him eventually, and by pulled him off, I mean everyone took turns landing 1 extra kick on the young master while pretending to help. I aimed mine below the belt. Don't look at me like that. The equipment was already decommissioned. I checked his affixes. And then, the miracle. Beaten half to death, Joe Kai's body gave up its treasures. The green decent talent popped out first. Then, glowing like a small blue sun, Thunder Control itself rolled onto the sand. Ding! Recyclable. Value, 3,280 points. 3,000. The blue affix was worth 30 years of ordinary training. But I didn't recycle it. I hit fusion instead, and lightning crawled through my veins and condensed into a crackling blue core behind my eyebrows. A talent that took the young master 18 years and divine luck to awaken, transferred to me because a big, angry man threw him at a wall. Somewhere in this world, there's a god of fairness, and that day, he filed for early retirement. By evening, I cleaned out the second floor too, where the advanced students trained, picked up strength enhancement and defense enhancement, fused them, pumped my eco points in, and upgraded both to blue for pocket change. My strength went from village boy to 8,000 kilograms in an afternoon. Oh, and I zapped Elder Chen off a treadmill with a sneaky lightning bolt to make him drop his big affix, the one that makes you giant. His hair stood straight up for an hour. Everyone blamed the treadmill. I fused the affix in a bathroom stall and grew to 2.7 meters of muscle, then shrank back down. Because unlike every other transformation talent in this world, mine goes in the recycle bin when I'm done with it. Removable giant mode. The engineers of heaven never intended this, and I refuse to feel guilty. One day. From bottom of the class to 3rd level of body tempering in 1 day, and nobody had seen me do anything except walk around and occasionally check my shoe. Time to go home. And home is where this story stops being funny for a minute. I lived with the Song family. My parents died 10 years ago in a beast tide, and my father's best friend, Elder Song, took me in and raised me better than most people raise their own blood. His wife, Madame Lin, cooked like she was personally at war with my ribs being visible. Good people, the kind this genre usually doesn't let you keep. That evening there was a guest. Madame Lin called out that someone was back, and out from behind her stepped a girl I hadn't seen in over a year, Song Rulan, their actual daughter, 3 years older than me, off studying at the top university in the province, and the single most beautiful human being I had ever seen with these eyes or the previous owners. Cold though, cold like a museum exhibit. The memories said she'd been distant with me since childhood, and the previous owner had responded by being terrified of her, which had improved exactly nothing. What the memories didn't say, and what I'd learn much later, is why my parents died. They ran into that beast tide because little Song Rulan was trapped inside it. They traded themselves for her, and her child brain, drowning in guilt it couldn't carry, just deleted everything. All her memories of me from before. All the warmth. Her parents never told her the truth because they couldn't bear to hand a little girl that weight. So she grew up cold toward the boy who stole her parents' attention, never knowing the reason her parents doted on me was buried in the same grave as my mother and father. I didn't know any of that yet either. I just knew my beautiful, not-quite sister looked at me like unpaid furniture. But here's the thing about that evening. Song Rulan was not the girl from the memories, and I was not the boy from hers. The old me couldn't meet her eyes. The new me sat down across from her and cheerfully reported that I'd just broken through to the 3rd level of body tempering, expecting, I'll admit it, a crumb of approval. Because for this body that was 3 years of progress in a season, she looked at me and said, "You're almost 18. Your talent is rather lacking." Cool. Very cool. Love that for me. And while I was recovering from the drive-by assessment, she was studying me back, puzzled, because the timid kid who used to flinch at her shadow was suddenly holding eye contact and cracking jokes. And somewhere behind that beautiful glacial face, a note was being filed. Then she tapped the table, and a medicine bottle and 2 cultivation manuals appeared out of thin air. Storage space. That's not college student equipment, that's legend equipment. She slid them over and said the pill would raise my cultivation talent to blue, and the manuals were only mid-grade because anything better would be wasted on my comprehension, and that she'd provide stronger ones when I improved. In her head, I found out much later, this was warmth. This was her, at maximum warmth, insulting my comprehension while handing me a fortune. Then I looked over her head, because looking over people's heads was my entire personality now. Unknown, 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 unknown. A whole row of unknown, which meant every one of those affixes was so far above my rank the system refused to even name them. The only thing I could read was a single tag. Weakness. Silver. Silver. A tired after-work affix. At silver. The affix version of a nap, ranked higher than anything owned by anyone in this city of tens of millions. Who are you? I thought, smiling and thanking her for the pill. What are you? And why, when you told me to stay home tonight and not go out, did it sound less like advice and more like a weather forecast? She tossed me a jade charm and told me to keep it on me at all times. I pocketed it and made a note. Tonight, whatever she thinks is coming, I want to be on a roof watching it. Here's what I didn't know while I was busy being smug. Sitting across the table from me was a woman on her second life. Song Rulan had already lived to the end of this world once. In her first life, she'd become the strongest being on the planet, an empress in everything but paperwork. And then something came out of the deep sky, a black mist that swallowed the sun, and one look from it erased her and the earth both. She woke up back in her 21-year-old body 1 week ago with thousands of years of memories and one obsession. This city dies tonight in a beast tide unless somebody stops it. Last time, her parents died in it. This time, she came home. She wasn't cold at dinner because she didn't care. She was cold because she was counting hours. I went to my room, swallowed her pill, and immediately discovered a problem. The pill grafted a blue cultivation talent into me, and my scavenger panel listed the graft as a brand new affix, removable, recyclable, 500 points on the open market of my own body. I recycled my sister's precious gift within 10 minutes of receiving it, and pumped the points into raw blood chi. Sorry, Sister Yang. It's not that I didn't appreciate it. It's that appreciation doesn't stack, and strength does. Then I got curious about the outer limits of my cheat, and this is the part of the story where you're allowed to be concerned about me. Question. If negative statuses become recyclable trash and injuries are negative statuses, what happens if I injure myself? I took my father's old titanium blade off the wall and cut my arm open in the bathroom. An injured affix and a pain affix appeared. I recycled both. The pain switched off like a light and the wound closed in 3 seconds flat. 3 seconds. I stood there, bleeding into the sink, watching my skin knit itself, and a thought formed that I can only describe as financially motivated self-harm. I cut deeper. Blood loss affix, recycled, instant refund. My face went pale and then unwent pale. I named this training method, and I'm not proud of the name, but I am rich. And since pain was now a renewable resource, I went shopping for a proper engine. The public forums keep an open archive of flawed cultivation manuals, techniques too broken or dangerous to sell, posted in hopes some madman fixes them. I searched for methods that damaged the practitioner, and the top result was a genuine masterpiece of the genre. 4th rank manual. Immense power. First requirement. The practitioner must castrate himself. I stared at that line for a while. Somewhere out there, I thought, some poor desperate soul has actually trained this. What a ridiculous notion, I thought. Remember this moment. It's called foreshadowing, and it comes back wearing a mask. Scrolling past the self-mutilation classics, I found the real one. Bloodthirsty Demon Art. Tier 4. Top grade. It burns your own life essence as fuel, multiplies your combat power, and kills every normal person who tries it, because burned essence means weakness, blood loss, exhaustion, a shopping list of slow death. A shopping list of slow death. For me, a shopping list. Every drop of essence it burned per hour would generate negative affixes, and every negative affix was a coin, and my recycler would sweep them up automatically while the healing outpaced the damage. I learned it in one evening. Pushed it from beginner to great perfection in 3 hours because the only limit on advancement was how fast your body could burn without dying, and dying was, for me, a billing error. Do you understand what I had by midnight? A furnace in my chest that converted my own blood into money, refilled itself, and ran 24 hours a day whether I paid attention or not. Passive income. I had invented passive income in a fantasy world, using an evil manual and a recycle bin. I set the system to auto-collect, lay down, and got the best sleep of both my lives, for about 5 hours. The city sirens woke me up at 3 in the morning, and they weren't playing around. Beast tide incoming, rank 5, danger level, city destruction. Everyone evacuate, do not attempt to fight, do not make unnecessary sacrifices. Rank 5. Let me translate. The strongest man in Blackwater City, the city lord himself, was a rank 4 threat on his best day. A rank 5 beast tide meant something was coming that outclassed our entire leadership the way a truck outclasses a shopping cart. The broadcast wasn't telling us to be brave. It was telling 10 million people to run and hoping some of us made it. And my first thought, lying there in the dark, was, Song Rulan told me not to go out tonight. She knew. She knew a disaster no instrument can predict, hours before it happened. And instead of dragging her family out of the city, she just said, stay indoors. Which meant one thing. She wasn't planning to run from it. She was planning to be the reason it stopped. My second thought, and I want you to remember I'd had my powers for less than a day, was that a beast tide meant thousands of monsters dying in one place, and every dead monster drops affixes. The entire city was a fire alarm, families were grabbing children, and I was on my balcony doing profit projections. I dumped my overnight earnings into blood chi, hit the level of chi blood realm most people need green talent and 30 years to touch, grabbed my father's blade, and jumped off the railing. Elder Song kicked my door in about 90 seconds later and found an empty room, then found his daughter's room empty too, and reached the only conclusion available to a middle-aged man at 3 in the morning. The kid snuck out on a date. During the apocalypse, Madam Lin said absolutely not. Our daughter is made of ice. And Elder Song said, have you seen how weird they act around each other? They've clearly been in love for years. I need you to hold on to this misunderstanding because it outlives the entire beast tide. I ran toward the outer wall against a river of fleeing people, climbed 30 meters of fortification in 2 jumps, and from the top of the wall, I finally saw what rank 5 means. The outer district was on fire, horizon to horizon. Monsters wrapped in flame were pouring through a breach in the far wall, thousands of them, and out past the breach, pinned to the earth by a spear of ice the size of a high-rise, was a lizard, 100 meters of lizard, wreathed in fire that turned the ground under it into a lava river. And standing on the ice spear, small as a punctuation mark, was a girl with her right hand raised, a golden fireball condensed above the city. Not big like a building, big like a weather event. It fell on the monster cave, and the mushroom cloud that came up turned night into noon, and the shockwave alone deleted every monster within a kilometer of the breach. That was my cold, distant, unpaid furniture-glaring sister, casually solving a city-ending catastrophe like a chore she'd been putting off. I stood on the wall doing the math on my own 8,000 kilograms of force, which 1 hour ago had felt like the power of a god, and now felt like exact change. Okay, noted, the bar is up there. Then I jumped down into the burning district, because the bar being up there didn't change the fact that the floor was covered in money. What followed was the most profitable night of my short second life. I dropped off the wall into the burning district and fell on those monsters like a debt collector. First customer, a 7-meter flame beast rampaging down a residential street, everything it touched igniting. I jumped, swung, and my blue lightning split it lengthwise in one stroke. 2 green orbs rolled out of the halves. Death, green, 75 points. And flame control, green. Hold on, flame control? Monsters drop their talents when they die? Monsters drop their talents when they die. I stood over that corpse, recalculating the value of every living thing on this planet. Then I fused fire control on the spot, upgraded it to blue mid-battle, and became a 2-element disaster. Lightning in one hand, fire in the other, carving through the tide and harvesting affixes off every corpse like the world's most violent farmer's market. Even a rank 3 beast, an innate realm monster that would headline a local catastrophe, went down in one exchange and paid out a blue death orb worth 200 years of a normal person's training. Around me, actual heroes were fighting and bleeding for their city, and this is where my reputation began, entirely by accident. Grizzled veterans saw a blood-soaked teenager massacring monsters at the front and started shouting encouragement. Look at this brave young man. This is the spirit of our people. Don't let the kid outfight us. Then they watched the brave young man one-shot a beast that outranked them all, and the encouragement changed to, what is he? And the theories began. Genius from a great sect. Secret military project. Hidden disciple of the city lord. I confirmed nothing and kept farming, and let the record show I did save several hundred lives that night, purely as a side effect of chasing loot, and I've decided that counts. By dawn, the tide was dead. I strip-mined the crater where my sister's fireball had landed, a field of orbs so dense the ground glowed, including a blue serious injury tag that the pinned rank 5 lizard had shed, worth 3,000 on its own. My haul, itemized, because I itemize, speed enhancement, stamina enhancement, a blade mastery affix with someone's decades of sword experience baked straight into my hands. An eye of truth that reads any enemy's strength at a glance. And combat mastery, a talent that's basically a black belt you can wear on your soul, so rare that most geniuses never see one. I fused everything, upgraded everything to blue, and stood in the ruins at innate realm. Day 2 of my new life. A realm that eats prodigies decades, reached before my second breakfast. I'd also, somewhere in that long night, stopped being able to smell myself, which the crowd around me had not. A dozen fighters loudly wondered who'd soiled themselves in battle. It was me. It was blood, ash, and monster, but it was me. I set my own clothes on fire, flame walked into a shop, changed into a new martial arts outfit, and left the district looking like an advertisement while the veterans behind me added spontaneous combustion to my list of powers. And on that walk home, the rain took the funny out of everything, because I'd been here before. The ruined buildings, the heavy rain, the smell. This exact scene 10 years ago when I was small and my parents left me in a safe zone and never came back. I stood in the wet street where they'd carried me to see the bodies, and my brand new memories and my old ones finally clicked together, and I understood something about the boy whose life I inherited, and about the monsters, and about what I actually wanted from all this power. Not the leaderboard. The things that come out of those caves took my family twice. Once in this life, once in the old one. When I'm strong enough, I'm going to walk down into the deep dark where they breed, and I'm going to hand them the bill. Meanwhile, above the clouds, Song Ruolan was having a much stranger night. She'd stayed up there watching me the whole time, by the way. Watched the adopted brother she remembered as a timid, third-rate student suddenly display twin blue talents and innate level power, and mentally filed it under late bloomer must be the stimulus of danger. She was even planning which of her future treasures to give me, and that's when it grabbed her again. The pull, the same force that had thrown her back in time once, already took hold of her soul, and she barely had time to collapse the monster cave and fly home before her consciousness was ripped out of her body and hurled 5,000 years forward, into the future she came from. Except it wasn't. She stood in a primeval forest under a dim sky, in the year 8025, 100 years before the black mist had destroyed everything in her first life. The world was intact, cities stood, and when she reached the nearest one, an entire sky full of warriors knelt and called her empress. In this timeline, her younger self had lived the whole span. She pulled the records and read her own history, and then she read mine, and her eyebrows did something they hadn't done in 1,000 years. Li Wei, the timid adopted brother, martial emperor, city lord of Blackwater for 100 years. Died in battle holding the line against a rank 7 monster, after which the Empress personally came home, wiped out the caves, and moved the entire city into her own domain, which is the kind of grief response you can afford when you're the strongest thing on the planet. She had 100 extra years this time, so she flew into the sun. Yes, into the sun. It was the hottest training room available, and cultivated for a century to meet the black mist at full power. It came on schedule. 100 years to the day, a stain spreading across the deep sky, bigger than the swollen earth itself, and the whole human race of that era pointed at the sun and cheered, because the sun was cracking open. Out of it rose their empress, out of seclusion at last, a phoenix with wings that spanned tens of millions of kilometers, the strongest human who had ever lived, at the peak of 2 full lifetimes of preparation, charging the darkness while billions below chanted that with her, they were safe. The eye opened inside the mist and looked at her, and she and the earth stopped existing. Again, no contest, no exchange, no lesson learned. A century of extra cultivation had bought exactly nothing. Just a wall at the end of the universe with her name on it. And she woke up in her bed in Blackwater City, 10 hours after she'd left, in the body of a college junior. Third life. She lay there in the dark doing the arithmetic of despair. It can't be fought. It can't be outgrown. She just spent 100 bonus years proving that. But if she could keep looping, keep coming back with knowledge, keep raising humanity's whole curve faster each time, leave records for her past self, awaken her talents earlier, stack lifetime on lifetime, she needed somewhere to store 5,000 years of future knowledge where no one would find it. Her parents were too fragile. And then, through the door, she heard me yelling that breakfast was ready. The future martial emperor, her little brother, who dies a hero in every timeline where she doesn't fix things. That morning she knocked her knuckle against my forehead, and a library fell into my skull. Dozens of cultivation techniques, rank 7, lightning and fire aspected, the kind of manuals that cost more than city districts. She watched me gape and said, calm as a tax notice, that she expected me to test into Imperial Capital University, the top school of the entire human race, where she'd also be transferring. There was a genius tournament in the capital in 1 week, top talents from 100 provinces. She was going. She'd win it. I asked if I could come watch. She said the tournament wasn't for spectators, and anyway, the entrance exams for my level were a month out, so I should stay home and study. I nodded very seriously and privately decided to enter the tournament and surprise her at the finals. What? She's not my real boss. Before she left, my sister, the secret empress, transferred 10 million to her father, told the family not to leave the city for a few months in a tone that made the ceiling lamps sway, walked to the balcony instead of the door, and flew away in a pillar of golden fire, leaving her parents frozen mid-goodbye. Madame Lin had thought her daughter was doing okay at college. Now the whole street knew she'd left as a Grand Master. And Elder Song, bless him forever, turned around and transferred me his life savings, 11 million, everything, so I could buy a decent technique before exams. He apologized it wasn't more. I took it, not because I needed it, because when a man like that gives you everything, refusing is the only insult worse than wasting it. In my head, I was already listing what I'd buy this family when I ruled the world. Then I went to the airport, and I need to tell you about the airport because it set the pattern for my entire public career. A plane ticket to the provincial capital cost more than a worker earns in years, distances here being tens of millions of kilometers. So while waiting for my flight, I just walked. 2.5 hours of strolling through the most crowded building in the city, hoovering up the fatigue and stress affixes of 10,000 exhausted travelers. 3,000 points. Free. Everyone else in that terminal saw a young man pacing nervously before his flight. I was running a toll booth on human misery, and business was excellent. On the plane, I got a window seat next to the single most enthusiastic person in this hemisphere, Lin Mei Feng. Junior high classmate, back when the old me was a nobody. She'd gone on to the elite school, top genius of our whole city, and the reason she remembered me at all was written across her face the moment I mentioned where I was headed, my sister. Lin Mei Feng was a Song Rulan superfan, not casually, devotionally. Her eyes did the thing anime characters' eyes do. She was flying out for the university's early entrance exam, and when she learned I might get her within photograph distance of her idol, I stopped being a former classmate and became a pilgrimage route. I liked her immediately. She was loud and honest and haggled like a knife fight, which I discovered at the Beast Pet City when I tried to buy a frost lizard. Quick explanation. I'd realized my healing was the bottleneck on my money furnace. The faster I regenerate, the harder I can run bloodthirsty demon art, the richer I get per hour. And regeneration talents live in exactly one place, animals that regrow body parts. Hence the pet market and a sleepy frost lizard with a tail regeneration affix over its head. The seller wanted $300,000 and gave a tearful speech about raising her from an egg and only selling because of his sick mother. Lin Mei Feng, without blinking, offered 30. The seller screamed. She listed the market rate for second-tier pets, told him his acting was terrible, and grabbed my arm to leave. He caved at 30 before we'd gone 5 steps, then howled about his fate. That woman could negotiate a dragon out of its hoard. Then I took my discount lizard, snapped its tail off, watched the tail regeneration affix confirm itself as the stump began to knit, and set the lizard on fire. Look, I know. But before you judge, the crowd around me appraised that lizard at $3 million once they saw the tail regrowing, so I burned a used car, not a pet. It dropped its affixes like everything does. I upgraded tail regeneration to purple, and it became limb rebirth, regrow anything, survive dismemberment. The pet merchants called me a psychopath with good eyebrows. Lin Mei Feng mourned the $3 million for an hour, and my furnace's fuel line just got a 10-fold upgrade. By the next morning, I'd farmed the market crowds all night, cranked every stat, and hit the ceiling of Innate Realm, where the system offered me a choice. Break through to Grandmaster now, or stay and compress my innate energy through 10 refinement cycles, a legendary path where each cycle multiplies your foundation, and almost nobody completes even 2, because each one is a decade of agony. A decade of agony, or in my currency, points. I bought all 10 cycles overnight like they were a season pass. Every future realm I ever reach will now hit 10 times harder than anyone else standing on the same floor. Compound interest, but for punching. The entrance exam, at least, I attended honestly, mostly. Registration for the exam was a folding table by the university gate, manned by a bald slab of a man who looked 40 and claimed to be a freshman. His name was Hao Jingyi. He demanded we call him senior, and his entire test was, you may register if you can take 1 punch from me. He melted into a puddle of chivalry the second he saw Lin Mei Feng and waved her through on vibes alone. Me, he wanted to punch. I caught his fist with 1 finger. Then, while he was recalibrating his worldview, I let a little static run up his arm. He yanked his hand back, hair smoking, and stamped my registration with the expression of a man who has just made a powerful enemy at his part-time job. Fastest bureaucracy of my life. The exam itself was held in a stadium with 40 or 50,000 geniuses from across the province, and it introduced me to how this world measures people. They put you in a testing dome, you hit an alloy pillar as hard as you can, and the machine prints your multiplier, how many times your raw blood chi you can actually output. Talent classes, stacking rules, the 4 categories of affixes. Lin Mei Feng lectured me through all of it like a sports commentator. The short version is that most geniuses can stack 2 or 3 affix types before their bodies give out, and whoever stacks more wins the genetic lottery. The first dark horse of the day was a masked swordsman named Hao Ming, who stepped into the Class D dome, the one rated for Grandmaster level impacts, and blew it up. Purple high-grade talent, 3 silver affixes, 17,000 times multiplier. The crowd lost its mind. The professor lost his mind. Hao Ming stood in the wreckage, radiating smugness, and asked if he could just be given first place now. I looked at his affix panel, then looked again, because between the impressive stuff sat a white affix I couldn't parse, plus a sword talent, plus something that read Blade Demon Physique obsessed with dueling any swordsman he sees. Noted. Avoid eye contact with the sword weirdo. Lin Mei Feng tested next, and here's a fun fact. Her panel showed 1 more affix than it had the previous day. Berserker God Battle Body, purple. She'd awakened a brand new talent overnight just from trying to keep up with my training pace at the pet market, which upgraded her from ordinary city genius to purple high grade. And she credited me for it with eyes so sincere I had to look away. I didn't have the heart to tell her my training pace had been a shopping spree. Then it was my turn, and I skipped the Class C Dome, skipped D, and walked into the Class E Colossus, the one rated for Great Grandmasters, 5 realms above my paper grade. The crowd's commentary was split between he's showing off and he's insane. I hit the pillar once. The dome, a building-sized machine rated to withstand 5 million tons, slid backward several meters with a sound like the sky clearing its throat. Half the audience covered their ears. The readout printed a multiplier of 172,000, 10 times the masked swordsman, and the alloy pillar inside had melted. The professor apologized to me for the quality of their equipment. To me, for the machine, I broke. The crowd's theories, and this became a running feature of my life, were beautiful. Hidden gold talent, secret royal bloodline, Legendary true chi refinement. Everything except a boy who recycles garbage. And then Hao Ming landed in front of me, tore off nothing, declared nothing, simply looked at me with shining eyes and asked, in front of 50,000 people, whether I had a boyfriend. The silence had texture. I punted him into the testing machines. Several exploded. He dragged a trench through the ground with his face, lay there like a discarded mop, and dropped a serious injury affix which I collected on my way past, because grief is no reason to skip income. He was carried off, cooing about my strength. Lin Mei Feng laughed until she had to sit down. I want to say this was the last time this man confessed to me. It was not the last time. It was not even the last time that week. The university president received me personally after that. Qin Feng, strongest man in the province, a martial god, one of the ancients who'd been alive since the spiritual energy returned 1,000 years ago. He didn't posture. He asked me and Lin Mei Feng, as the province's new hopes, to remember where we came from after we inevitably outgrew this place, because his province was poor and remote and bled talent every year. Then he opened the university armory to us. Tier 6 top-grade gear, free. The armory itself was a cathedral of robotic arms and vault boxes, and my redemption card entitled me to Tier 6 top grade. Gear rated for martial kings. Gear the escorting professor couldn't afford on a century of salary. And he said so, twice, with his eye twitching. I walked out with 2 life partners. First, a blade called the Flame Thunder Wild Blade, a purplish-black monster with 200,000 tons of resting weight and mass-shifting runes, so it can weigh whatever my arms can cash. When I bound it with blood, its affix panel opened for me like a menu. Armor piercing, flame boost, thunder boost, all upgradable, and I had to physically stop my hand from feeding it my savings on the spot. Second, a set of silver wing nano armor, liquid metal that lives in a wristwatch, wraps me in a second, flies at 10 times the speed of sound, turns invisible, self-repairs, and hosts an AI assistant that calls me master, which I ordered it to keep doing. The professor gave us the sales talk. Standard armor has better raw defense, but when nano armor's core survives, it rebuilds itself from cheap materials, whereas his poor colleague once saved for decades to buy heavy plate and got a repair bill of tens of millions after one battle. Lin Mei Feng asked what happens if the nano core itself gets destroyed. Nothing, said the professor, beaming. Because then it's unrepairable. And also you're dead, I added, and he nodded like I'd passed a quiz. Both pieces had upgradable affixes. Everything in this world has affixes. Everything with affixes is, from my perspective, unfinished, and I am the finishing department. Now, the night before we flew to the capital, I did something the university would probably describe as irregular. I went to the Colosseum. The provincial capital's fighting pits are a beehive of 30,000 arenas where anyone can bet on anyone, and where the crowd density and injury rate make it, from a scavenger's point of view, the single richest real estate on the continent. Every punch drops fatigue. Every knockout drops trauma. The floor of that place was carpeted in glowing money that only I could see, and most of it was sealed behind arena barriers where only fighters could walk. So I became a fighter. Masked, obviously. I registered as Purple Flame Lightning, which I thought sounded appropriately dramatic, paid the blood test fee, grumbled about the blood test fee, and went looking for a stage. My debut was a Grandmaster ring, 5 realms above my measured grade. I made my entrance as a bolt of purple lightning crashing down onto the stage, which the crowd loved so much they instantly bet everything on me, driving my odds down to almost nothing. Then the board displayed my actual realm, innate, and the entire stand made a noise like a dying accordion. Grown men screamed about their savings. Someone demanded I be investigated for match fixing. The champion across from me, a 7th-level grandmaster on a 4-win streak, visibly relaxed. The bell rang. I turned into a lightning circle, orbited the stage exactly once, and stopped with my fist already inside his chest's personal space. He left the arena through the barrier, backwards, unconscious. The crowd went from mourning to euphoria in 1 second flat, and I stood there mildly annoyed, because the lap around the stage had been the actual point, sweeping up every affix orb the previous fights had dropped, and the haul was 5,000 measly points. 7 minutes per fight, 1 stage at a time. Retail. I don't do retail. So I asked my AI whether one could open a multi-opponent arena. Turns out yes, if you post a prize. I posted 500 million and an open challenge. Anyone below the 5th level of Grandmaster, unlimited entries, come and get it. 3,000 people signed up. 3,000 Grandmasters, each 5 realms above me, packed onto a fused megastage 3 kilometers wide, all planning to split my prize like a buffet. Their entry fees alone made me 100 million before anyone threw a punch, which improved my mood so much, I almost forgot to be worried. The odds against me hit 12 to 1, at which point I walked to the official betting window, put my nano armor on the counter, had it appraised at $1 billion, and bet the $1 billion on myself. The martial king running the window asked if I was sure with the voice of a man watching a car drive toward a cliff. The crowd interpreted my confidence as a bluff. On stage, the leading challenger, a junior from the university's top 100, with an axe the size of a door, warned everyone to take me seriously. Nobody took me seriously. I stomped stomped once, and lightning ran along the metal floor into 3,000 pairs of feet. It wasn't a battle. It was a group electrical inspection. The axe senior caught the first bolt on his blade, which conducted it beautifully, and left the stage as a billiard break, taking a dozen colleagues with him. A tenth of the field went down in the first second. The survivors' combined barrage landed on me all at once, 1,000 techniques in one thunderclap, and broke against my armor of compressed flame like weather. With one exception. Somewhere in that barrage, threaded invisibly through the noise, something went through the space beside my head, and the graze alone set my entire soul on fire. My vision went red. My knees tried to resign. Soul attack. The one damage type that ignores muscle, armor, and realm aimed straight at the wet software behind my eyes, and my soul was still factory settings. The caster was a masked man hiding deep in the crowd of fighters, purple rank soul destroyer, the rarest and nastiest attack class in the world, and he'd almost ended my whole story with a stray shot, and now he was winding up an aimed one. First real fear of my second life. I put the eye of truth on him, watched the invisible arrow leave his hand, and threw myself sideways so hard I dented the stage. The arrow passed through 3 fighters between us, and each of them just stopped, eyes empty, gone, like someone had unplugged them. Then I was in front of the caster, and I want to say something eloquent happened, but what happened was lightning, all of it, at once. The most dangerous man in the building came apart mid-gasp, and his talent orb rolled out of the ashes, glowing purple. Soul Destroyer. Mine now. I fused it right there in the middle of the battle, dumped 1,000,000 points into it, and my soul went from factory settings to silver while 3,000 grandmasters watched their comrades convulse. For about a minute, every soul expert within 100 miles felt something ancient and terrible wake up nearby and politely decided it was someone else's problem. After that, mercy. Relative mercy. I raised my foot and brought a second lightning storm down. Wider, gentler, a paralysis tide instead of an execution, and the stage became a carpet of twitching grandmasters shedding affixes like autumn. Serious injury, blue. Carbonized bone, blue. Purple ones scattered in like raisins. I lapped the 3-kilometer stage in a minute, vacuuming, while the announcer, an actual martial emperor, tried to remember the words for declaring a winner. 3,000,000 points in affixes, 9 billion in winnings from a single bet slip. The betting clerk counted it out with the expression of a man who would be retelling this at family dinners for decades. And then, because the machine was hot and I only get one first night in any casino, I did it again, bigger. Third arena, prize raised to 3 billion, entry free, anyone below the 7th level of Grandmaster. And this time, the house celebrity came down from the balcony. Xiao Xuan, first name on the university's top 100 list, a once in 50 years psychic warrior who fights from inside a 20-meter mecha built of solid telekinesis. He'd been watching my fights from above with his entourage and declaring me not worth his time, which I solved by offering him my nano armor as a personal prize. Because I'd noticed something about top-ranked celebrities. Their odds are terrible, and their pride is expensive. He descended. The crowd roared. The odds on me hit 17 to 1, and I walked to the window one more time and bet the entire 9 billion. And I swear, the clerk aged. 10,000 other fighters piled onto the stage to be technically present for the prize split, then prudently formed a distant ring and left the middle to the 2 of us. Xiao Xuan's psychic mecha flexed, cracking the arena floor with pressure alone. In answer, I let go of my restraints, and my giantification took me up past 10 meters, past 30, to 50 meters of muscle wrapped in flame, and somewhere down below, Lin Meifeng's whole worldview made an audible cracking sound. The fight was the best I'd had in either life. His psychic greatsword against my flame thunder blade, 100 exchanges a second, shockwaves so violent that a patrolling Marshal Venerable had to seal the arena in a barrier to keep the 10,000 freeloaders alive. He was genuinely magnificent, 20 times my base power, technique polished over a decade. For the first minutes, we were dead even, and I could hear his composure fraying, because dead even was impossible, because I was 5 realms down and matching him. And while we fought, I was doing my other favorite thing, sweeping. Every pass across the stage, my giant feet and trailing lightning hoovered up the affixes this crowd of elites kept dropping. Mid-duel, blades locked, sparks raining, I quietly fed everything I'd swept into my own upgrades. True chi refinement, 5th cycle, 6th. Combat power, half again. Once more, he felt it happen. Blade to blade, eye to giant eye, he felt his equal grow a size between heartbeats, and he said, with the calm of a man watching the tide come in over his sandcastle, "You were hiding your strength." No, senior, I was raising it. There's a difference, and you're standing in it. His mecha cracked like an egg. My last cut put him into the stage floor at the bottom of a kilometer-long trench, alive because I liked him, and his silver psychokinesis talent rolled free along with a bouquet of purples. The announcer declared me winner to a stadium of people tearing up losing tickets. 99 billion, in one night. On my way out, they retested my blood and confirmed, to widespread grief, that I was still technically an innate student who had just farmed the entire provincial fighting scene with a mask and a smile. Naturally, somebody tried to rob me. 5 martial kings and a martial emperor, veterans of the university's old guard, tailed me out planning to relieve the arrogant child of his 100 billion in the traditional manner. I let them commit to the chase, then hit the whole formation with 100 soul blades from horizon distance. 4 dropped out of the sky clutching their heads. Their martial emperor boss concluded, from the sheer wrongness of being soul-slapped by a teenager, that I must be under the protection of hidden masters, and called the whole thing off in terror of an organization that does not exist. I marked their armor signatures for future accounting anyway. I keep books on everyone. Then I flew home at Mach 10, wind screaming past my open helmet, provincial lights wheeling under me, richer than most noble houses, and I remember laughing the whole way down. I spent part of the fortune before sunrise, back in the university's weapons complex, on the least glamorous shelf in the store. Elemental orbs, beginner-grade trinkets for baby mages, a few tens of thousands each, notable for exactly one thing, an affix that absorbs its own element to slowly grow stronger. I bought a fire one, crushed it like a walnut, picked the flame absorption affix out of the wreckage, and installed it in myself. It worked. That's the headline of my whole career, honestly. It worked. My refining speed for fire energy multiplied on the spot, and when I upgraded the affix to purple, multiplied again, 30 times over. And suddenly I was looking at a future where I grow stronger just by standing near anything hot. I bought a lightning orb and did it again. Then I bolted matching absorption affixes onto my armor and blade, fed the armor a high-grade fire crystal, and watched my gear begin literally eating its way up the ranking table, tier by tier, on its own, overnight. Self-upgrading equipment, self-upgrading me. The engineers of heaven keep leaving the keys in the ignition, and I keep not apologizing. The next morning at the departure ground, one last piece of local theater. Kang Yi, 9th year, former #1 of the university before Zhou Xiang took his crown, spotted Lin Mei Feng, activated his campus heartthrob protocols, and got politely declined. Then Hao Ming, mask and all, drifted over to inform him that a man of his caliber wasn't qualified to so much as look after Li Wei's companions, and things escalated the way things do around Hao Ming, straight past words to a full-power thunder spear aimed at a freshman's chest. The spear got caught by an invisible hand mid-air and detonated harmlessly, and Kang Yi found himself pressed to the ground by a psychic weight he couldn't budge, courtesy of Zhou Xiang, who had shown up, bandaged, upright, and one whole realm stronger, because our duel had broken his bottleneck. He told Kang Yi that murdering juniors was beneath the school, told me, stiffly, that he owed me one, and glared at Hao Ming, who took the opportunity to loudly declare that his heart already belonged to another. Zhou Xiang spent the entire flight to the capital sitting as far from us as the cabin allowed. There's a version of this story where all that was my peak, where the kid with the garbage cheat farmed arenas forever and lived happily. I think about that version sometimes, because the next morning we flew to the capital for the 100 Provinces Genius Tournament, and in the capital, the fabric of my world came apart. The night before the opening ceremony, alone in my dorm, my spiritual sense brushed against something hanging in the air of the room next door, a golden crack. Invisible to eyes, intangible to hands, but my soul could feel it humming. A seam in the world, and it was leaking that same strange pull I'd felt twice before around Song Rulan without knowing what it was. A normal person walks away from the glowing crack in reality. I pushed my soul out of my body and dove in. I woke up 5,000 years in the future, in a body that was mine and wasn't. Year 8025. An office full of floating screens, a window over a city thousands of kilometers wide, and a flood of borrowed memories crashing into my skull. This was me at the far end of a whole other life. The me who never dove into a crack, because in this timeline, the crack had swallowed me and left the original boy to live out his years the slow way. And here's the first thing that life taught me, and it taught me by subtraction. In this future, my scavenger talent was gone, vanished the moment the timelines split. Everything I'd looted before that night I kept, the silver affixes, the techniques, but the cheat itself, the recycling, the upgrading, the infinite ladder, gone. And without it, 5,000 years of relentless cultivation had gotten this other me exactly here. Marshal St. Peak, ruler of a city named after himself, genuinely one of humanity's strongest, and thoroughly, permanently stuck. Third tier of the modern power rankings. The ceiling had caught him the way it catches everyone whose talent stops growing. You know what the memories showed me at the tournament? In this version, I placed somewhere in the top 100. Lost to a boy called Prince Duanhua with a silver top-grade talent. A graduating senior who'd crushed me on pure realm advantage. Watched Song Rulan, who'd fought the whole tournament with her power suppressed, casually delete that same prince in one move. The memories showed me the revenge, too, because this other me was petty in exactly the way I approve of. 10 years of monastic cultivation at the Capital University, absorption affixes grinding day and night, until in his 5th year he climbed to first place on the heavenly ranking, the top seat among the 100 strongest students of the era, and in the match that got him there, he beat Prince Duanhua flat. The prince vanished from the world the same week. Everyone assumed wounded pride. File that assumption under things that come back to bite entire civilizations, because the same year, the top 20 of the heavenly ranking started dying, quietly, one by one, and the investigations went nowhere. And a few suspicious families even sent assassins after me, the rival with the mysteriously fast cultivation. The truth was so much worse, and 50 years of future history never found it. And then, for 50 centuries, I watched her pull away from me and everyone else, become the empress for real. unify the planet, publish her techniques to uplift all of mankind, and quietly build a fleet of colony ships, because she alone knew what was coming out of the deep sky, and she alone knew it couldn't be fought. Also in those memories, Hao Ming, the masked sword weirdo. In this timeline, he'd become one of humanity's handful of war gods, married 7 or 8 wives, spawned a family of several million, and, I checked this twice, made every one of his sons call me godfather. He announced the apocalypse to me personally by kicking my door off its hinges and flying in on a sword, robes billowing, screaming that the world was ending and I was meditating like a shut-in. Then, with the end of days confirmed and the evacuation list being drawn, he got to his actual agenda. His family had been allotted seats. His family was several million people. The allotment was not several million seats. Would I, his oldest brother, his dearest friend, the godfather of his children, ask the Empress for 1 million extra places on the Ark ships? I pointed out that I'd have to beg Song Rulan, who, in this timeline, had barely spoken to me in 50 centuries. He pointed out that I was single, childless, and would be wasting my own seat anyway. I pointed out that his sons only called me godfather because he'd ordered them to decades ago. He grinned and said nothing, and the grin said everything. 3,000 years. He'd been engineering the godfather angle for exactly this negotiation for 3,000 years. 5 millennia of friendship as a long con for boarding passes, executed with the patience of a mountain and the shame of a seagull. I asked. She granted it. 1 million seats, waved through over dinner, and the strangest part of that whole day wasn't the favor, it was the dinner. Elder Song, kept alive and young by his daughter's pills, nervously suggested one last family meal, clearly braced for the Ice Queen to decline the way she declined everything for millennia. And Song Rulan said yes, smiled and said yes. Elder Song froze with his chopsticks in the air. In this whole grim timeline, that dinner is the one warm thing. 4 people around a table at the end of the world, and me not yet knowing that the reason she'd suddenly thawed was that she wasn't the same woman anymore, that the traveler wearing my cold sister's face had already watched this family die once and had come back determined to sit at this table properly. One more memory, and this one I'd pay to forget. The reason Hao Ming wore a mask back in school. To afford a sword technique, the broke young Hao Ming had trained a free manual called the Evil Repelling Sword Manual, the famous one, the one with the entry fee. He'd found a modified version that let him keep his anatomy but flooded him with the wrong hormones, and until he mastered the technique, he was, functionally, the most beautiful woman in 3 provinces, with the soul of a man and, temporarily, the orientation of neither. Every confession he'd ever thrown at me was a side effect with a mask on it. He got better. We became brothers. Life is long and extremely stupid, so that was the future. Humanity packing its bags, my other self a glorified doorman for the apocalypse, and a 100-year countdown to the Black Mist. The countdown had 10 days left when Prince Duanhua found me. I was flying home from that dinner, full and almost happy, when the sky opened and a beam of darkness vaporized my flesh before my nerves finished reporting light. I came to at the bottom of a lava crater as a skeleton with opinions, my silver healing talent stubbornly refusing to let the last spark go out. Above me landed a withered old man wrapped in black fire, all skin and bone and hate, and it took my burned-off face a moment to place him, Prince Duanhua, the tournament genius who'd beaten me in school and vanished 50 centuries ago. Except, as he cheerfully explained to my skeleton, he'd never been a genius. He'd never even been human. Prince of the Dark Clan, planted among our prodigies to murder the best of us. The tournament-era killings history wrote off as accidents, him. The classmates who never came home, him. The only reason I'd survived school was that Song Rulan happened to be nearby the day he picked me, and he'd been forced to settle for the others. And then he'd sealed himself in the deep dark for 5,000 years, feeding on his entire clan's power, sustained through the boredom of centuries by one single warm fantasy. Kill Li Wei slowly, then kill everyone he loves. He told me this the way you'd tell an old friend about your retirement plans. I was humanity's 3rd strongest tier. He'd come out of his seal at Supreme. I threw everything. My blood-burning art pushed to self-destruction, a blade strike that could have split the old earth, and his answering palm print blotted out the sky and annihilated it all mid-air. It wasn't a fight, it was an unboxing. He peeled me down to a strand of soul, held the strand up like a trophy, lit it with black godfire so I'd stay conscious for the main event, and began describing how I'd get to watch the whole human race die first. That's when the sky behind him grew a golden flame. His head left his body before his mouth finished the sentence. No warm-up, no exchange, no chance. The gap between that supreme monster and Song Rulan was the same gap he'd just spent an hour demonstrating to me, one full tier further up. His falling corpse burned to nothing before it hit the ground, and a slender hand caught my soul strand out of the air, and the black fire on it went out at her touch like it was embarrassed. "Sorry I'm late," she said, and for a moment her voice wasn't the Empress's voice at all. It was the voice of someone who'd been too late before. Then she rebuilt me. Bones of a 12th rank beast, blood essence 100 times richer than the thing that had just killed me, herbs from beyond the top of the ranking scale, all of it burned together in her phoenix fire for 10 days, while other Supremes came to gawk from a respectful distance and left when she glanced at them. She put my soul into a body 10,000 times stronger than the one I'd lost, and apologized, actually apologized, for not predicting the ambush. And while I lay in the forge fire growing new lungs, I did some quiet math about the person doing it. 5,000 years of documented coldness, and then this. Materials worth more than continents spent without blinking on the adopted brother she supposedly disliked. Whatever wall stood between me and my sister, it had a door in it, and something kept knocking. 10 days later, humanity left Earth, 100 ships, a billion chosen, every supreme flying escort. I stood on a hull plate and watched my homeworld shrink, and beside me, the strongest of us stared back along our wake, because she alone was certain the thing from the deep sky wasn't coming for Earth. It was coming for her. Or for us. It had always arrived exactly where she was, and 100 years into the voyage, on schedule to the day, the stars behind the fleet went out. The black mist had crossed a century of light years like a hallway, and when Song Rulan threw herself away from the ships to draw it off, it turned to follow her, which confirmed one theory, and then it changed its mind and swallowed the fleet anyway, which confirmed a worse one. It wasn't hunting her, it was hunting all of us, and the last thing I saw before it ate my second life was her phoenix fire vanishing into it like a match into a well. I woke up on the floor of my dorm room in the capital. Year 3025, 13 hours after I dived into the crack. My scavenger panel glowing, fully operational, and my head full of 5,000 years that hadn't happened yet. I lay there and did inventory, because inventory is how I cope. Bad news. In 5,000 years, at humanity's absolute peak, we could not fight that thing. Not the Empress, not the fleet, not anyone. Good news. I'd kept things. The Tier 10 techniques of a future civilization sat in my muscle memory, downgraded but real. I knew the Dark Clan had a prince embedded in this very tournament. I knew names, dates, deaths, the location of every landmine in the next 50 centuries. Best news. The cheat only dies in the future. Here now, it was alive. And unlike my poor other self, I had no intention of spending 5 millennia stuck at a ceiling. The ceiling was a talent problem, and talent for me was a shopping category. And one more thing, the strangest thing. When I met Song Rulan in the corridor the next morning and looked over her head, my new silver rank eyes could finally read a few of her unknowns. Gold affixes, a row of them. And past the golds, tags of a color I'd never seen, dark gold, affixes with names like Empress and Phoenix Nirvana Body and Earth Sovereign, an affix you can only earn by ruling this planet for 1,000 years. She hadn't ruled anything yet, not in this timeline, which meant the affixes had traveled back with her, which meant the cold girl next door was carrying lifetimes the same way I was now carrying one, and the golden crack was hers, and every time she looped, I could apparently stow away. My sister was a time machine. And judging by the weakness tag that never left her panel, the machine was running on something that hurt. I said none of this. She said none of hers. We stood in the corridor, two smugglers complimenting each other's luggage, and went down to breakfast. The 100 Provinces Genius Tournament began that afternoon. 100,000 of the human race's finest packed into one square, 300-plus provinces, every one of them sending its 10 best per grade, plus the wildcards, plus the prodigies of prodigies. The vice examiner descended as a dragon-shaped tornado and resolved into a cold-faced young man named Wen Jian, 10th on the heavenly ranking. The crowd's murmur told me the significance. Normally, they send someone from the bottom of the ranking to humble the provinces. This year, they'd sent the 10th, which meant the capital believed this year's class contained monsters worth measuring. Wen Jian opened proceedings with a speech consisting of one gesture. He pressed 300 times gravity onto everyone at once and announced that whoever ended up kneeling should go home, since trash would only die in the first round anyway. A quarter of the field ended up kneeling. Some ended up horizontal. The square bloomed with humiliation affixes, green and blue orbs of rage and shame everywhere. And while 100,000 geniuses were busy being traumatized, one young man among them stood perfectly at ease under the pressure, waited for the crowd to fly off toward the exam site, and then walked the emptied square alone, sweeping 11 million points of other people's worst mourning into his pockets before strolling to the apocalypse after everyone else. Several geniuses who saw me standing motionless as the square emptied assumed I'd frozen in terror and flew off snickering. I passed them all en route at 10 times their speed. The snickering did not survive contact. The first round was 3 days inside a top-grade Rank 7 cave, a pocket world thousands of kilometers wide, stocked with beasts up to the Martial Emperor peak. Rules: hunt for points, same grade teams allowed, top 1,000 per grade advance. Song Rulan gave Lin Mei Feng a protective jade talisman, told her to stick with me, gave me a look that dared me to comment, and flew off alone in a streak of gold, with a comet tail of admirers chasing her that I didn't even bother to pity. My own plans for the round were simple. Score points, keep a low profile, and find the Dark Clan prince before he started collecting human souls. The low profile lasted 4 hours. First order of business inside the cave, and I genuinely rank this among my proudest achievements, I cured Hao Ming. He'd followed me in, of course, glowing with devotion. Lin Mei Feng tried to shield him from me, having concluded from the pretty face that he was a lovesick girl I kept brutalizing. He responded to her protection by threatening to end his own life if I truly hated him, at which point I made him announce his actual gender, watched Lin Mei Feng's soul briefly leave her body, pinned him with telekinesis, and applied the treatment protocol from 5,000 years of future medicine. The treatment protocol was a kick, a precise, clinical kick, to the exact place his cursed sword manual had rerouted. He dropped 3 purple affixes, including one literally named, "May you be childless and without descendants," and then, glowing like a small sun in my collection screen, the root of all evil itself, girlish, silver rank. I recycled it for 25 million and watched 5 years of hormonal sabotage drain out of the man in real time. His posture changed, his voice dropped. He stared at his own hands like they'd just been returned from a pawn shop, then looked up at me with an expression I'll never fully recover from, and swore brotherhood to the death. That's the origin story. The future's #1 war god became my brother because I kicked him in the destiny and it fixed him. Medicine is not always beautiful. Also, mid-treatment, I made a discovery that quietly rewrote my entire economy. Struggling against my grip, Hao Ming's affixes had rattled, but not dropped. And when I reached out and pulled, one came away in my hand. Not knocked loose by damage. Taken. If I'm stronger than you, I don't need to hurt you at all. I could rob people of their talents. Directly. Like fruit. I stood there holding another man's affix, feeling the whole shape of my future shift. And that's exactly when a martial king came screaming over the ridge with a cloud of living darkness on his heels. Prince Duan Hua, 50 centuries early, wearing his young face, chasing down a fleeing genius to eat. The cloud noticed our group, licked its lips at 4 fresh souls, and I felt every one of those 5,000 borrowed years condense into a single, very specific grudge. Last time, you unboxed me. My turn. I crossed the distance in one flash and swung, and my future-grade blade skill cut his darkness open like wet paper. The strike should have ended him. It ended his teleportation crystal instead, the coward's exit his father had packed for him, and he vanished a heartbeat ahead of the edge, leaving my blade to carve a canyon through a mountain range. Hao Ming and Lin Mei Feng stood in the dust cloud, recalibrating their understanding of me. Fine, low profile was a nice dream, but I'd tagged his soul before charging. Wherever he ran in this cave, I could feel him, a greasy little signal 300 kilometers out. We hunted. He, meanwhile, being a connoisseur of bad decisions, ran straight into the tournament's other monster. Deep in the cave's grasslands, a young man in silver armor had just pinned a 100-meter beast to the ground with a spear throw from the clouds, checked his points, and sighed that the hunting was too slow. Wen Tianyu, the spear genius of Zhangzhou, and the prince, drifting past as a hungry black mist, looked at that shining talent and saw lunch. He announced himself with an ambush, which Wen Tianyu answered by throwing his spear backward without turning around, on instinct, missing the prince's skull by a hand. The two introduced themselves like proper geniuses, exchanged exactly 1 round of trash talk, and then leveled the landscape. The prince's clan-fed dark arts against a first-level spear intent, magic circles against gunlight, an exchange that would have flattened a city. At the end of it, the prince was mid-gloat, hellfire array charging, watching his enemy stagger, when Wen Tianyu's damaged body lit up crimson. His next thrust came twice as fast as anything before it, tore the array apart, and forced his Majesty of Darkness to burn escape crystal number 2, fleeing with shattered ribs from a boy he'd picked as prey. 2 crystals down. I felt the tag signal jump across the map and adjusted course, and by the time our group arrived at the blast zone, there stood Wen Tianyu in the wreckage of his own armor, bleeding from 100 cracks, furious, magnificent, and glowing faintly red. And over his head, my eye of truth read a shopping list: gold strength enhancement, silver spear mastery, silver speed, silver defense. And the engine under it all, the Berserker God Battle Body, a physique that converts damage into power, output rising with every wound, with a note at the bottom that at maximum injury, he could exceed the ceiling of gold talents entirely. I want to be honest about what happened next, because history deserves accuracy. I looked at a wounded hero who'd just driven off my enemy, and I said loudly that the Dark Prince was my friend, that we'd been hunting Wen Tianyu together, and that my friend was a useless coward for losing to him. Hao Ming's jaw dropped. Lin Mei Feng started explaining that I was joking, then read my face, grabbed Hao Ming, and got both of them out of the blast radius, because she'd figured out what I wanted. I wanted the Berserker at full ignition. A Berserker at full ignition sheds high-rank affixes the way pine trees shed needles, and you can't buy those in any shop. He obliged. Oh, he obliged. He ate a healing pill, cracked his own restraint level up to 30 times output, and came at me like a falling star with opinions. We fought for half an hour across 10 kilometers of cave, and it was the most honest fight of my life. No crowd, no bets, just his spear looking for my heart and finding after images. Every wound stoked him hotter. His silver spear became a silver dragon, then a storm of silver dragons. I finally had to unwrap giantification and meet him at 150 meters tall, and even then his last exchanges rang my blade back on its hinges. Silver and purple orbs streamed off his burning body in ribbons the whole time. 20 million points of pure profit, raining into my collection while the two of us redecorated a mountain range. Then his engine ran dry. All at once, the way berserkers do. The spear slid out of his hand. He looked up at me from the floor of the crater with his eyes already going dark, and asked, with a wrecked little smile, whether I'd even used my full strength. Then he burned out completely, and dropped like a puppet with the strings cut, shedding a final bouquet of silver affixes, including a near-death tag worth 10 million on its own, and I healed him. Climbed down, dug a purple regeneration affix out of my vault, and pressed it into his ruined body, because a man like that, dying in a hole for my grocery run, was not a trade I was willing to log. Also, and I say this with the tenderness of a farmer, a berserker with a permanently installed healing talent is a renewable resource. His damage threshold just doubled. He'll be twice the monster within a year. When he woke and found himself alive, healed, and gifted a talent, he processed it for a long moment, stood, bowed in the old style, and asked my name. I told him the truth, including whose friend I wasn't, and watched confusion, gratitude, and battlelust fight for custody of his face. Battlelust won, obviously. He informed me we'd fight again at the finals. I informed him I looked forward to collecting. We understood each other perfectly and have been friends ever since. 2 reasons. 1. A man like that guarding humanity's wall is worth more than his loot. 2. And I say this with the tenderness of a farmer, a berserker with an installed healing talent is a renewable resource. I fight him once a month. He gets stronger. I get paid. He thinks we're rivals. We are. I'm also his landlord. The prince's signal, incidentally, had been drifting toward our battle the whole time, planning to vulture whichever of us fell. Then something huge and golden fell out of the sky onto him. Song Ruolan had noticed a stray, dark-attuned genius circling her brother. That was the whole investigation. She lobbed him at my feet the way a cat delivers a bird, 4 silver affixes and a near-death tag already leaking out of him, and stood by while I collected the debt of another lifetime. I didn't torture him. Note that down somewhere, given what he'd done to me across 2 timelines and what he had planned for everyone I love. I just took everything. Palm on his head, and every affix he owned came out by the roots. His dark gold talent, his prince's bloodline, his silver frame, all of it, while he screamed about his clan's martial saint avenging him. Then fire. The Dark Clan's 50th-century murder plan for the human race ended as a smear of ash in a training cave 3 days into the tournament, and nobody in the world would ever know it had existed. His estate settled as follows. His gold speed enhancement recycled for 30 billion, which broke my internal price scale so hard I had to sit down. His storage ring gave up its spatial affix, which I fused and upgraded until I carried a private warehouse 10,000 kilometers wide behind my eyebrows. His teleportation crystals gave up the real treasure, a teleport affix, which I fed 10 billion and pushed to gold. Blink range, 10,000 kilometers. Cooldown, a tenth of a second. Space itself was now a door I owned. Say what you want about the prince. He was the best thing that ever happened to me, twice. And then Song Ruolan raised a golden privacy barrier around the 2 of us, sealing out the world, and asked, in the tone of someone who has rehearsed casualness for an hour, when exactly my talents had gotten so much better. Because before last night, little brother, neither your realm nor your affixes looked anything like this. Decision point. She was a being who could end me with a fingernail, standing close enough to try, asking the exact question I couldn't answer honestly. But I'd also spent 100 years of another timeline learning who she is under the ice, so I gambled on a half-truth engineered for effect. I told her that twice now, at night, some unseen force had poured into me, and my strength and talents had simply risen by morning, and that this last time there'd been a dream, being swallowed in the stars by a black mist. Her pupils detonated. To her, those words were impossible. Those words were the private ending of her private apocalypse, the scene only she had ever survived to remember, coming out of the mouth of a teenager who should know nothing. I watched the Empress of 3 lifetimes recalculate everything she thought she knew about her adopted brother in real time, land on the only available theory, that her time rifts were somehow feeding me power and leaking me glimpses, and then, and this is the wonderful thing about my sister, get excited about it. If the rift could strengthen me, maybe it could strengthen others. Maybe her curse was a resource, so she opened her half of the cards. An evil god at the end of the future, she said. Unbeatable, recurring. A doom she'd seen with her own eyes and had never told a living soul about, laid out flat and factual inside a golden bubble at a school tournament. We agreed, without either of us saying the word timeline, that we'd stay close to each other and see whether the force came again. 2 smugglers agreeing to share a shipping route. Family. She also gave me the prince's confiscated storage ring, 2 spare escape crystals inside, and said she'd craft me better once she found materials, because whatever she is, across 5,000 years and 3 lifetimes, in every single one of them, she ends up handing me things and pretending it's nothing. One more thing happened at the cave exit, and at the time, it seemed like a footnote. While Hao Ming and Lin Mei Feng waited for me by the gate, a perfumed young man in flame-red armor descended to hit on Hao Ming, who, reminder, still looked like the second most beautiful woman in the province. The young man introduced himself as Murong Ming Jian, son of a martial god, offered university admission in exchange for a date, took Hao Ming's counteroffer of a fistfight poorly, learned Hao Ming was male, got excited about that too, and was in the middle of demanding a kneeling apology when I arrived and punted him into a mountain. We left. A wandering rank 6 beast found him in the rubble, thanked nature for its bounty, and ate him. I did not know, because his affixes were nothing worth reading, that the boy was the grandson of the first Blade Saint, one of the 10-pillar martial saints of the human race. I did not know his uncle, the martial god Situ Li, would go looking, find the beast, cut it open, recover a cracked armor core, and watch the final recording, a flash of golden lightning, right up to the moment the camera died. Keep this footnote somewhere handy. Footnotes in my life have a way of growing armor and coming back. The rest of the tournament, honestly, was a victory lap with paperwork. First round scoring. scoring, I turned in 30 million points, first place across all grades. Next closest score was under 1,000,000. The Plaza's collective theory engine produced hidden martial Saint Xion and secret bloodline of the Xiao family. Sure, whatever helps. Second round, class battles. I won mine in the time it takes to sneeze. The real show was Song Roland's semi-final, where the favorite, a 7th-level martial king with silver top talent, got flash frozen with the entire stage before his opening move landed. The audience learned what I already knew. There were 2 brackets in this tournament, everyone else's and hers. My semi-final was the rematch Wen Tianyu had been living for. He'd broken through to martial king since the cave, doubled his output, and waited for me on the stage with his spears singing, and when I stepped up, he announced that this time I wouldn't find him so easy. Then the bell went. He unleashed a 1,000 phantom spear storm that had the front rows evacuating, and I walked through it and out the other side without breaking stride. Because our gap hadn't narrowed, it had tripled. He hunted my after images across the stage with growing despair, while I did an unhurried lap collecting every silver and purple orb the previous 10 matches had deposited, and when the stage was clean, I appeared behind him and tapped him on the neck. He woke up in the medical bay an hour later, reportedly asked whether I'd at least worked up a sweat, and upon hearing the answer, requested the bed nearest the training hall. That man will surpass me one day out of pure spite, and I'm rooting for him. We met in the final, Song Roland and I. I conceded instantly and publicly, which the crowd interpreted as either romance or terror, and they weren't wrong about the second one. Her techniques were tier 12, mine were tier 10 on a good day. There's a version of me that fights that fight for pride. He also loses, but with bruises, which left the traditional closer, the exhibition challenge against the vice examiner. Wen Jian, 10th on the heavenly ranking, martial emperor, a man whose gold rank wind spirit body renders him outright immune to physical attack. The challenge exists so that each year's provincial champions can be publicly reminded of their place in the food chain, and no challenger has ever won. He greeted mine by announcing that with the realm gap between us, even if he stood perfectly still, I couldn't scratch him. I asked if he'd care to stand still then. You could hear the whole square inhale. A voice from the crowd, suspiciously similar to Hao Ming's, called out that surely the 10th rank senior wouldn't retract his own words. Other voices joined. Within a minute, 100,000 geniuses were cheerfully peer pressuring a martial emperor into becoming a training dummy, and Wen Jian, trapped between his pride and his mouth, agreed. He planted himself mid-air, dissolved into his spirit form, a storm giant immune to everything with edges or mass, and smirked out of the hurricane. He was right, for the record. No physical attack of mine could have touched him. Which is why the blade I swung was carrying something else entirely, my full Soul Destroyer force layered invisibly along the physical edge, the one damage type his wind spirit immunity had never once been calibrated against, because who puts a soul art inside a sword? I cut the storm giant in half. The halves hung in the air for a heartbeat, deeply surprised. Then he re-solidified into a man with a wound running shoulder to waist, managed half a sentence of disbelief, and dropped out of the sky, unconscious, from an exhibition match he'd agreed to stand still for. The medics, who by this point in the tournament were familiar with my work, didn't even run. And then the sky produced a man in black and white armor, and the whole square went quiet in a new way, a scared way. Situ Tianlong, number 1 of the heavenly ranking for 3 straight years before he vanished into seclusion. Grandson of the first Blade Saint, one of the 10 pillars guarding the human race, the most talented swordsman of the last 50 years, hauled out of his sword trance by news of my little show, and now hovering over the arena, staring at the blade in my hand with bloodshot eyes. My future memories knew him well. In 5,000 years, he becomes a supreme. In this year, right now, he was a 10th level martial emperor with a documented hobby of dueling promising swordsmen to death and calling it accidents, protected forever by his grandfather's halo. And he hadn't wandered here by chance. His uncle Situ Lai, still holding a cracked armor core with golden lightning burned into its last frame, had sent him a very specific message about a very specific junior. The footnote had grown armor, right on schedule. He requested a friendly exchange of sword arts. I declined. He landed in my path, smiled, and offered to seal his strength down to my realm, binding contract, officiated by the martial saint director himself. The crowd oohed. The contract was sworn, and I, carrying lifetimes of paranoia, said yes while quietly moving my thumb to the button. The duel opened as advertised. Sealed to my realm, he came on in his demon form, bone spurs and black fire, a berserk sword saint frothing with joy, and I batted him across the arena. He got up laughing. Came again, got batted again, laughed harder, and the crowd began to relax into the show. A mad genius getting humbled, affixes of rage and minor injury sprinkling the stage, me quietly pocketing them between exchanges and wondering why a man this outmatched looked so happy. He looked happy because he was counting down. Mid-swing, mid-laugh, his aura unsealed. All of it. 8th level of Martial Emperor, 1,000 times the agreed weight. A full power beheading stroke at point blank against a boy he'd promised the heavens he'd spar fairly. And in the frozen half-second while the arena's Martial Saint was still parsing the betrayal, while Lin Meifeng's scream was still leaving her throat, while my sister's protective talisman was already burning uselessly against a blow it was never rated for, I used the button. Teleport. A 1/10 of a second of cooldown. I was in the clouds before his blade finished falling, and the explosion that flattened the arena hit nothing but my afterimage. My 40 billion points I spent right there, hanging in the stratosphere, on realm upgrades, while below me the crowd screamed and my friends broke their voices and Situ Tianlong stood in the crater savoring his kill. The savoring is what I timed it by. I came back down through the smoke behind him, already 3 realms heavier than I'd left, and took his head off his shoulders while his uncle was live explaining to the Martial Saint that technically, legally, the contract only said he'd seal a portion of his strength without specifying the portion, so no rules were broken, you see. Technically, director, no rules were broken, you see. His body came apart in slabs. The square learned about it when his severed arm hit the stage, and in the ringing silence I floated down through the settling dust and told his uncle, a full martial god whose face had gone the color of paper, that his nephew fought exactly as honestly as he negotiated. The uncle charged me. The Martial Saint director punched him over the horizon personally, out of what I can only assume was embarrassment management. Estate settlement, again, because grief and accounting wait for no one. Gold talent enhancement, 23 billion. Gold strength, the light and dark power, a fusion element above anything I carried, and his blade demon physique, the obsession engine that made him a monster and a corpse, into the vault with the rest. All in, my points crossed 40 billion again, and my hands, I noticed, were completely steady. The director declared it lawful. Life and death in the ring, contract honored, case closed. Then he pulled me aside and said, quietly, the way you tell someone about weather rolling in, that I had just killed the only descendant the first Blade Saint loved, that the old man had once carved apart armies for the human race, and that no wall on this planet except this university's would slow him down when he came for me, one of the 10 pillars of mankind, a being 2 full power tiers above my ceiling, coming for me, for my family, for everyone under my roof, on a timetable of his choosing. I thanked the director for the forecast. And I thought, walking off that broken stage with the crowd chanting a name they'd never heard 3 days ago, that somewhere behind my eyes, 5,000 years of memory were already laying out the answer. Because in the other timeline, this exact old man had taken everything from me. And this time, I knew where the poison grew. Second place in the 100 Provinces Genius Tournament came with 10 billion in prizes, elite student status, and a dormitory the size of a resort. I spent my first evening as a national celebrity teleporting 700,000 kilometers home, scooping up Elder Song and Madame Lin mid-argument about the news coverage, and depositing them inside the university's 11th tier defensive wards before the first Blade Saint's grief finished turning into planning. Elder Song asked how we'd traveled. I said, very fast train. He chose to believe me, which is the foundation of our relationship. Then he noticed his daughter waiting for us at the dormitory door, looked meaningfully from her to me, and whispered that he'd known about us two since the night of the beast tide, and that he approved, and that Madame Lin owed him money. I did not have the vocabulary, the jurisdiction, or, frankly, the courage to fix that misunderstanding, and it lives in that man's heart to this day, compounding interest. And that night, the pull came again. I felt it bloom out of Song Roland's room, that deep hum under the world, and this time, neither of us pretended. She was going back to the future, and we both knew I could stow away, and when I came to her room, she just looked at me and said, stand closer. So the last thing that happened in year 3025 was my legendary Ice Empress sister collapsing into my arms as her soul left, and me, holding her, muttering that she should smile more, and her disembodied soul answering out of thin air that I had 3 seconds to put her body down properly. Then the crack took us both. This trip was different, wrong from the first breath. We didn't land 5,000 years out. We landed 3,000 years out, in the year 6025, and Song Roland arrived as a bare soul with no body waiting, over the corpse of a city, under a sky where blood-red demons drifted like ash. Earth was dead, not declining, dead. She spent her first hours hiding from patrolling blood demons, a bodiless soul who could be snuffed out by any mid-rank monster, and her first days finding humans at all. When she finally did, it was a scavenging party from a hole in the ground. A teacher named Jiang Li leading teenagers through a ruined city to strip armor off centuries-old corpses, because in this future, humanity could no longer manufacture weapons, only inherit them from the dead. Shadow demons ambushed the party while she watched. The teacher tried to detonate herself to protect her students and was casually skewered mid-heroism. And that was the moment the bodiless empress decided she'd seen enough, wiped the demons off the map with a thought, and borrowed the teacher's unconscious body to go find out what had murdered her species. 30 years. It took her 30 years of borrowed bodies and combed ruins to assemble the history, and the history had a shape she recognized in her bones. In this timeline, she and I had both vanished from the record in our university years, and without us, everything fell. 900 years after our disappearance, a 12th rank breach opened, the Shadow Cave, and when humanity's strongest, the dragon god Wei Kang, led every war god and hundreds of martial saints down to answer it, none of them came back. Not defeated, erased, in a single engagement no survivor could describe. After that it was just arithmetic, 1,000 years of it, until the human population was 1/10,000th of what it had been, hiding in holes. She found the biggest hole under a hill that shouldn't have been a hill, on the exact site of a cave she remembered from Blackwater City, filled in and camouflaged. A buried sanctuary, tens of millions of people, hidden and alive for 4,000 years, and guarding it, alone, a martial god who challenged her at the gate and matched her borrowed body blow for blow, a fist against her palm with force that cracked the training ground they stood on. When the nano-helmet finally retracted, it was Lin Mei Feng. Lin Mei Feng, 4,000 years old, the last general of a dead species, keeping one city of survivors alive in a hole in the ground. Her talent had capped out ages ago. Everything she was because of the armor she wore, a tier 10 set with silver affixes that no forge of her era could have produced. My armor. The Silver Wing. Handed to her, the records showed, by a dying man 3,000 years ago, and the sensor logs said she'd fallen asleep holding the wristwatch core every single night since. 4,000 years of nights. Some things you don't get to joke about. That one lives where the jokes don't reach. Song Rulan proved her identity, and Lin Mei Feng wept, and gave her the armor's memory files, and that's how my sister sat in a buried city and watched the recording of how her own timeline died. It went like this. In that world, the two of us hid in the university for 7 years while the first Blade Saint circled. Then he stopped circling and cheated. He had my parents, our parents, quietly taken, and he offered Song Rulan a private trade, her life for theirs, delivered so that telling me was impossible. She went. Of course she went. She built a substitute puppet, a decoy body with a sliver of her soul, insurance so that dying would be a strategy instead of an ending. And she left her real body sleeping and walked out to meet him wearing a copy of herself. The trade was a lie. He killed the puppet, believing it was her, and the alarm charm reached me late. I arrived to find what I believed was my sister's corpse in the arms of her killer, an old man holding an urn and actually explaining, that since she'd refused to lure me in, he'd settled for making me feel what he felt. The recording shows what I became. My two demonic physiques, the Blade Demon and the Dark Prince's bloodline, chose that exact moment of madness to devour each other. And the thing that stood up out of my grief wasn't me anymore. It fought the first Blade Saint for hours, healed through wounds that should have been endings, teleported away and back with the heads of his family, and had him beaten, dying, done, when humanity's strongest arrived to save the day, saw a giant demon standing over a pillar of the human race, and drew the obvious wrong conclusion. Wei Kang's dragon claw crushed the demon into the earth. It escaped. The Blade Saint died of his wounds anyway. And the demon that used to be me gave its armor to Lin Mei Feng, its blade to Hao Ming, hid two sleeping bodies, one real sister and one broken one, and disappeared from the world to fight the darkness eating its own mind. For 900 years, it won that fight, barely, silently, in a hole. Then the Shadow Cave opened, a 12th rank breach flooding the planet with dark power, and the fight was over. The demon walked out of its hole, annihilated the Shadow Demon Lord for the crime of trespassing on its darkness, ate the human race's rescue army along with Wei Kang because it remembered his claw, and took the throne of the largest demon empire in history. That's what killed this Earth, not the monsters, us. Two missing people, one grief, one misunderstanding stacked on another. But the recording had a second half, and the second half is why I'm still standing here telling you this. Because 1,000 years into the Demon Emperor's reign, a stowaway soul arrived from the past, mine. The me from year 3025, riding a time crack, dropped into the demon's mind, and the demon, this world's version of me, 5,000 years of corruption deep, could not hold against him. My past self ate my fallen self across a century of silent war, took the throne wearing his face, and then did something no demon emperor in any history has done. He rounded up the surviving humans, the enslaved, the hidden, the hunted, and put them under the Empire's protection. Fed the demon legions on conquered caves instead, sealed Lin Mei Feng's sanctuary city inside a blind spot, and guarded it for millennia without ever knocking on the door. Found Hao Ming, crippled in an old cell since the rescue army fell, healed him, and made him the human race's shepherd, the acceptable face of an empire whose emperor could never show his own again. And in the deepest vault of the demon palace, inside a formation no one else could enter, he kept a body, real, sleeping, soul too damaged to wake, tended for 3,000 years by a monster who couldn't forgive himself for a death that, it turns out, had never fully happened. So, Song Rulan and Lin Mei Feng flew to the Shadow Cave, cloaked in my old armor's stealth, past Demon Emperor's standing guard, down a tunnel thousands of kilometers wide, into a demon world with a palace at its heart the size of a mountain range. And waiting at the palace gates, in full armor with a familiar blade on his back, stood a man who greeted Lin Mei Feng by name, Hao Ming, alive, the sole survivor of the army that fell 4,000 years ago, now a supreme, standing dormant at the heart of the demon empire. And when Lin Mei Feng asked him how, and why, and for whom, he just said, "He's been waiting for you for 5,000 years. Come." The demon on the throne was 100,000 meters tall, golden eyes, a crown of dark fire, the shape that every surviving human in every hole in the ground told their children stories about. And when it looked down at the borrowed body Song Ruolan wore, it recognized her instantly, through the disguise, through 3,000 years. And the first thing the emperor of all demons said, quietly, in my voice, was, "When did you arrive?" Then they had the single most overdue conversation in the history of time travel. He told her everything I've just told you. She stood in the hall where he'd ruled alone for 3 millennia, half monster, unable to wear his own face in front of the species he was secretly keeping alive, and she asked one question. And it wasn't about the demons, or the war, or the mist. It was, where is my body? He waved a hand, and out of a sealed vault behind the throne floated a sleeping woman he'd tended for 3,000 years without once letting anyone know she existed, not even Hao Ming. He gave her back her body. She took back her life, and Lin Mei Feng got her wristwatch core returned to her by an empress who told her, "You've been its master for 5,000 years, and only you deserve it." And watch the old general's eyes finally go red. Lin Mei Feng, meanwhile, stood in that throne room looking up at what her oldest friend had become and asked the question the whole dead world would have asked. Was it really you? Did the human race really end because of you? And before the demon could answer, Hao Ming did, and his voice filled the hall like a drawn blade. He said the fall wasn't Li Wei's crime, it was the human race's invoice. That a boy had been ambushed in a lawful duel and blamed for winning. That a saint had been allowed to hunt a student's family for years while every power that could have stopped him looked away, because the saint was useful and the student was nobody. That when the darkness finally took his brother, the mighty Wei Kong had shown up just in time to save the murderer. And that if the same had been done to him, he wouldn't have secretly sheltered humanity's survivors afterward like this fool on the throne did. He'd have finished the job. The killing intent rolling off him as he said it had been aged 4,000 years in a cell, and even the Empress's borrowed spine registered it. That's my brother. Wrong about the ethics, probably. Unshakable about me, always. And I learned, watching all of it alongside her in the shared memory, exactly how many times and in how many timelines this family has died for each other without ever once saying it out loud. We had 100 years until the end, so we spent them working. Arc ships again, built from salvaged future tech, loaded with every surviving human. And this time, a new escape plan, because the Demon Emperor had spent 3,000 years preparing one. His 10,000 soul banner, a 13th rank horror stuffed with 3 millennia of harvested enemy souls, not as a weapon. The mist would have shrugged off any weapon, but as a fuel tank. Soul power is what teleportation drinks, and with that banner to drain, the Emperor could blink himself, the Empress, and a fleet 100 light years at a swallow, faster than the mist could ever chase. For a while, it worked. The sky went dark on schedule, the mist bent its whole vastness after us, and we ran, teleport after teleport, across tens of thousands of light years, and every time it caught up in days, we were gone again in seconds. We even reached the edge of the galaxy, and that's where we learned the real rules. The galaxy is sealed, an invisible wall at the rim, in every direction, thickening as you push, until even teleportation moves you a single meter. Something built a fence around the Milky Way, and everything we've ever done has happened inside its yard. And the mist upgrades. Every 100 years, on schedule, its speed jumped. The first century, we outran it easily. The third, barely. When the soul banner finally ran empty, the Emperor turned the fleet loose on a heading, took the Empress, and went back to meet the thing over a dying red star to buy the ships a lead with the only currency left. That's where I got to see its second form. Under the mist, there's a giant, a single eye, an axe, a body the size of a weather system, and a power gradient that made our combined peak, an Emperor of demons and an Empress of phoenixes, feel like two candles debating a tide. My blade broke on its neck. Her phoenix dive vanished into it like a coin down a well. It cut me in half, burned what was left with a look, held out for a few minutes longer against her, and then the universe simply subtracted us both. And then I woke up on the floor of a dorm room in 3025 with my sister stirring beside me, both of us carrying the whole catastrophe in our heads, and let me tell you what she did before anything else. She checked I was breathing. The Empress of 3 timelines, back from watching a galaxy-sized predator eat her twice, and her first motion was toward me. Then we sat down, 2-person war council, and turned everything we'd seen into a list. Item 1. The mist tests us on a schedule and grows stronger each century it's engaged. No power we've ever reached touches it. But my talent has no ceiling. Hers refills every loop. And we now hold an affix called Earth Sovereign, both of us, a domain power that grows with this planet itself. The stronger Earth becomes, the stronger we become while standing on it. So humanity's rise stopped being charity. It's our stat sheet now. Item 2. The First Blade Saint. In every timeline, that old man's grief costs the world everything. This time, he doesn't get 7 years to fester. This time, I knew about a doctor. His name is Xiao Xuan, chief toxicologist of the human race's greatest hospital. Not a villain. That's the miserable part. A genuine public hero. The man who strolls into rank 9 poison zones and walks out carrying the survivors, adored by his staff, decorated by the state. What none of them know is that his real talent, the gold rank extinction poison body, doesn't neutralize the poisons he absorbs. It hoards them. Every toxin he's ever swallowed sits inside him, compounding, growing. And in 17 centuries, the horde outgrows the man and leaks. And 1,000,000,000,000 people die in a single season. And history never even learns whose body the plague came from. Song Rolan killed him quietly in her first life, days too late. This life, I had a better idea, because a man who can grow poisons is exactly what you want when your enemy is a martial saint who can't be stabbed, punched, or outlived. I teleported him out of his clinic mid-shift, straight off the ward floor, 300,000 kilometers to an empty grassland. Credit where due, he didn't panic. He shook my hand, asked calmly what I wanted, and while I talked, showed me my own palm, where a black dot was already spreading. He'd poisoned me on contact. His signature blend, the Fallen Emperor poison, distilled from centuries of absorbed horrors, no antidote existing on Earth, fatal below martial saint. He explained all this with the smug patience of a man who has never once been on the wrong side of a negotiation, and offered me a partnership on his terms. I recycled his incurable masterpiece out of my bloodstream while he watched. 20 million points, thanks for asking. Then, while his entire understanding of leverage was leaving his body, I put my hand on his head and pulled the extinction poison body out by the roots, horde and all. 17 centuries of future mass grave transferred into the one body on this planet with a recycle bin for a liver. Then, before the despair could really land, I made him the offer. Serve me. Brew for me. Take these formulas, and this is where I handed him poison recipes from 3,000 years in his field's future, and grow me something that can drop a martial saint. In exchange, talent. Not promises, a down payment, silver rank combat affixes installed on the spot where the hollow used to be, plus a magic talent for his poison arts, and a standing offer of gold if he delivers. The man had spent his whole life as a support class, watching a woman he loved choose the son of humanity's strongest, nursing the kind of grudge that curdles a genius. I watched him clench his new fists, feel power he'd never been built for, and do the math on what else I might be able to install. He knelt. Partly gratitude, partly terror, wholly sensible. The doctor who was going to end 1,000,000,000,000 lives now works for me, brewing the retirement package of the first Blade Saint, and every drop of his research roots through my body first, where it can never, ever leak. Item 3. Small but delicious. Refining god-killing poison needs a master alchemist. Rather than study for a decade, I found a middle-aged hobbyist who'd bought his way to a first-rank alchemy license, relieved him of an affix he was wasting, and upgraded it to gold. The upgrade slingshotted my consciousness into a training vision where a supreme will made me practice pill-making for a subjective century before letting me leave. I entered that vision checking my watch, and exited it one heartbeat later, a 10th rank alchemist with flour on his soul. Somewhere out there, a hobbyist woke up with a headache and a suddenly honest resume. I consider us even. Which brings us to the last morning of this story, and the doors of the sky-piercing tower. 18 floors. The university's great trial grounds, wired by the human race's finest formation master into 358 rank 8 monster caves, so that challengers can fight teleported beasts floor by floor. Students clear a level or two a year and call it glory. I registered a custom challenge. My custom challenge was, and I quote my own paperwork, teleport in every beast of rank 7 and above from all 358 caves. All of them. Every floor. The scheduling system paused for a long time, the way machines do when they meet their first true believer, checked my combat records, and confirmed, with the note that the current number 1 of the heavenly ranking would not survive floor 10 of what I'd just ordered. The first floor sent me 480,000 monsters. 8 hours of beasts raining out of teleportation rifts, while my 100 blood-forged flying blades worked and my storage space swallowed the corpses whole. Mountains of future alchemy stock. And outside, this was the part I couldn't see, but treasure most, a queue of elite students formed at the tower doors and began roasting me. 8 hours on floor 1. 1,000 points, when the standard advanced mode pays triple. The consensus hardened that the new 10th seat of the heavenly ranking had bought his ranking, possibly bribed the tournament, possibly fallen asleep inside. By day 2, when my floor counter finally ticked over and the score display revealed that my custom points doubled with every floor, someone did the arithmetic out loud. Hundreds of millions by floor 18, and was shouted down for math slander. They'll figure it out around floor 12. I've decided to let the scoreboard handle my reputation from here, so that's where I'll leave me. Inside the tower, farming an apocalypse of my own design, and out there beyond the university wards, an old man with a white blade grieving his way toward my family, and a black mist 3,000 years out already leaning on the sky, and I want to be absolutely clear about how it felt. It felt like standing at the bottom of a very long ladder with all the time in the world and a coupon for every rung. Ask the boy who arrived in this world with dead kidneys and a garbage sorting talent what he owns now. A brother who'd die for me, cured with one kick. A rival who grows me treasure every time we spar. A poisoner brewing the end of a saint. Parents behind the strongest walls on earth, and a sister who has died in front of me in 3 timelines, and now drinks tea in my dorm and lets me see her smile roughly once per geological era. The first Blade Saint thinks he's hunting me. The Mist thinks it's testing me. Neither of them has checked my balance. Floor 1, business is open.